Okay. So I guess I'm here with Chad Hansen right now, and we're going to try to pick up this discussion I've been having. And I don't know how to bring this up other than, I put up a video on agency, and I was trying to suggest that agency emerged ontologically out of increasing kinds of constraints. And so rather than talk about something like free will from on high, or rather than talk about mechanistic deterministic universe, and rather than talk about randomness, you try to talk about the way that determinism folds back in on itself in certain ways through increasing kinds of constraints, creating probability fields in which agency gets exercised. And I was giving the example of basically memory, imagination, and symbols, and how the elongation of time that gets constructed in discursive interaction allows for deliberation over options, and then again some sort of exercise of agency. Well, at any rate, I get a person chiming in going, oh, there's all this problem with this, that, and the other thing, to which I then shot a quick video response saying, look, you have to understand that epistemology is an ontological problem. That is, epistemologies somehow emerged out of being. There was being, and then knowing entered the scene. And the issue...
You froze.
Oh, you're froze up? You're still coming through here.
Okay, good. You just froze for a second.
And so,
I agree that ontology, or existence comes before knowledge. But I thought you meant if you want to explain what's going on, where do you start? Me, you start with epistemology.
Okay, even there. Okay, now if we're going to say this, we're going to say, okay, now the proper study of the area of, if we're going to do that, if we're going to exclusively reserve these terms for the study of X and Y and Z, I think we can do that. But then we get into all kinds of subcontained problems in there. Because if you say, for example, if you say, I'm going to begin with epistemology, and as you say, well, how do you know what you're studying without having some criteria of knowing? But then it almost immediately assumes the subject-object split, or it has to assume the knower is one thing and the known is something else, where ontologically you've already made a commitment then there.
Yeah, and that's the problem. But that's part of the hermeneutic circle. I mean, that's a problem of the hermeneutic circle, right? I mean, you're already in the center of it when you're trying to figure out what's going on.
No, because if you begin with ontology, you begin with raw experience, which is the fact that you have. Now, whether there is an experiencer of that experience, that's an epistemological claim. You don't have to make that commitment if you begin with ontology. Because you cannot deny the fact of experience, and it's not an idealism.
To me, ontology and experience, I mean, if I begin with onticity, I can conceive of a universe where there's no experience because there's no experiencers. I can accept onticity in which consciousness has not arisen yet, has not evolved yet.
Right.
All right.
Let's get at how you're doing. Okay. Now you're doing that. Now, when you're doing that, what exactly is it that you're doing? My guess is what you're doing is something that ontologically has become possible and has emerged out of a particular kind of being. That is, there's a displaced concreteness. If you begin with, I don't know how to say it. See, there's a slippery fish that's going on here.
Yeah, because, and part of it is because, for me, consciousness emerges out of the physical world, but you don't even know that the physical world, or there's not even, in a sense, a physical world to be talked about until consciousness is already there, emerged out of it, and so it's that.
That's right. So, I mean, if you wanted to defend the thesis, though, that epistemology, you try to defend the thesis as robustly as you can, that epistemology is prior to ontology, and I'll try to flank it.
Okay, but now I'm going to make this clear. What you mean is, in order to, I guess maybe you're not going to make the distinction. In order to understand the world, epistemology for me has to come first, has to be prior, because how could I why do I have a right to tell you what I know before I can tell you how I know?
I think philosophers have stymied themselves into a bunch of language games that they're not paying attention to, because what they've done is this. They go, there's axiology, epistemology, ontology, and then they're going to go, well, each of those is the study of, well, study kind of aligns with epistemology. So there's some way. There's some way in which they're kind of going, the only way that you can know the difference between these and know which one you're going on is to somehow do it epistemologically. That is horse feathers.
I know it, but so how do we untie ourselves out of that knot? I mean, it's kind of related to the thing that, in philosophy we study aesthetics and ethics, but really we're doing everything with our intellect, which is part of the branch called logic.
No, you're not. See, this is the great lie. I think the illusion is that the mind and the realm of thought, the mind and the realm of thought, because it moves from within its own realm, it thinks it exhausts the completeness of being, and it deludes itself. Knowing is only one kind of relating to the world. Right now, how am I interacting? I mean, Kiki came in here without me calling for her. She came in, actually busted in the door after I shut the door. And right now she came up here, and now we could talk about degrees of knowing, but how much of her interaction and mine right now, it came together through forms of knowing. Is it really going to be called epistemology? The way that my immune system recognizes the world around it, is that epistemic?
Not in the sense that I'm using the term in philosophy, but I mean, in a sense, if we're talking about the reading of indexes and icons by the nervous system, I mean, is reading a type of knowing, learning? Not,
No, I don't think that it is. I think that it's an ontological relation to a larger system that we're part of, and that when we come in, and then now we can epistemically, we can, through the rigors of epistemology and sort of philosophical apparati, we can disambiguate all this kind of stuff. But to imagine that it all began with epistemology, that to me, this is the difference between Husserl and Heidegger. The difference between...
Well, okay, now slow down. See, because now I'm thinking when it all began, you're talking about philosophy all began. Now you're talking about experience, whatever all began? I mean, is it idealism? Is that what you're talking about? I mean,
I don't think it's a commitment to idealism. I think that's where this whole thing gets confounding. Because I think as soon as I say I'm not committed to the knower and the known being separate, I'll get accused of being an idealist.
Yeah. And actually, I have this concept that I call, I don't know if it's current or not, but epistemological idealism. Because I believe that I have access to nothing but my own ideas, if you want to call it whatever, I'm stuck in myself, in a sense, which may be the whole universe, but, I have nothing else but whatever, but that doesn't mean that I think that there isn't a physical unit. I'm an absolute idealist.
Oh, right. I mean, I guess I would come at this, this one person was sort of suggesting to me that, everything that's known has to be known epistemically. And so you can't make any claim that isn't somehow, an issue of, epistemology, to which I wanted to go, you're so lucky we're not striking distance. If I had a Buddhist instructional stick, I'd smack you on the face right there, right across the head, rap and go, now, are you knowing this? Or are you experiencing it? Are you feeling it?
And of course, part of what I meant when I said that we have the three branches of philosophy: aesthetics, logics, and ethics. But everything really is logics in the sense that you have to use your reason to figure out what your aesthetic theory is.
No, it's all ontology. All the other stuff.
No, I agree. But what I'm saying is, what I was thinking was, what we do is we focus in on reason in philosophy to build these theories, but I'm not saying that's the metaphysical structure of the world or anything like that.
No, or even, I want to get at even organisms as they emerged and evolved. Like take a child. A child's relationship to the world is one of action and experience well before and beyond and well surpasses the epistemology that it's developing and the one that it'll subsequently critique as it becomes a philosopher. I mean, it will say, I didn't really realize my epistemology, and then they'll go, well, you must have had one, you weren't aware of it. So there's the whole sense in which there has to be an epistemology that was embedded in there, whether it was recognized or not. This is where philosophers go in there and rile their students and suggest that they have an embedded one that they picked up from the culture or from whatever. And so to that extent, you don't have to be explicitly aware of the fact that you have one. But to that extent, a person who had one, how were they able to get a sense of their epistemology without having the being there as the ground for it? In some way, it's like imagining people creating things out of thin air. I mean, it's like a disease of mentalism in philosophy.
Yeah, no, and I certainly agree that. Of course, the way I would put it, and as you know, reading Korzybski lately, I'm really getting more into that general semantics and the insistence on the use of words and stuff like that. To me, it's not ontology comes before epistemology, but rather onticity comes before consciousness, because ontology is the study of something to me.
See, again, that's the whole thing. We're back to the study of. See, the study of has to mean epistemology. See, that's why it's funny. I mean, why not just call ontology and axiology part of epistemology? See, when we say that there are three branches of philosophy, axiology, ontology, and epistemology, if we say that, then why don't we just say there's really philosophy's just only epistemology, and those other are just subdivisions of it?
Corey, that's exactly what I'm saying. The way I say it is the three branches of philosophy are aesthetics, logic, and ethics, but really all of it is done by logic because they're all theories. It's all theories. You know, aesthetics, what I call it, is just my theory about how aesthetics works, something like that. You know, so I'm using so it's all epistemology in that sense. Because when I say logic, what you mean by epistemology, because in my logic, you get the theory of knowledge. Just as in my aesthetics, you get the theory of mind.
Yeah, I know, but you couldn't come up with the basic axioms of any of your logic without beginning with all the kinds of ontological commitments that make it work. Whether it's dividing one and one, adding one and one to make two. You give me the objects that you're working with. You have a commitment to those objects that demonstrate and prove that epistemology to your satisfaction.
Yes, you're right. So onticity is prior to knowledge or consciousness, but we use ontology to understand onticity.
No. I would say it this way. In the same way that you can horse rattle your students around and suggest that they had an epistemology before they realized, I would say they've made countless ontological commitments before they have anything like their epistemologies. And in fact, their epistemologies are depending upon a kind of ontological ground of being. That is, without being, any knowing at all would be pointless.
Yeah, if not even impossible. But I mean, and that's part of the problem with the a priori knowledge and the a posteriori. I mean, because when I'm explaining to my students, how can you explain them the concept of knowledge that you don't need experience for when you gotta have a body to experience to hear about that concept?
So again, to me. No, I agree. Okay, yeah, that's right. I mean, but then you can do that then meta level though and spin it back environmentally. You know, I kept giving the example of memory. See, memory is not simply an epistemological issue. It's not just an issue of how well does an organism represent its environment. I think modern philosophical epistemology has sort of relegated symbolism, imagination, and memory to an epistemological function of an organism knowing a world. It's eclipsed the evolutionary biological problem of those phenomena as ontological, you know, the being of them in their own natural right. That is, instead of understanding ourselves as the site of these phenomena of world, we put ourselves over here and call it an epistemological issue where it's actually an ontological phenomena. And now we could say that now we're teasing that out with, you know, forms of logic and subsets and this kind of stuff. But yeah. I think that there has to be a commitment to again, the simplest way to say it is that the ways of knowing are always less than the ways of being. being includes many more things than what knowing is, and to that extent...
What do you know about being?
What's that?
What do you know about being?
That it is. And what that is, let's not make any commitments to it, but let's begin. But let's begin with the fact that there is something.
Yeah, good. And that's what I want to call ontology.
Okay, no, well, that's ontology. No, there's an ontology.
But ontology is the study. I mean, ology, right, is the study of something. I mean, that's what I mean.
No. You're turning it into an epistemology there.
Pardon?
You're forcing it into an epistemology. When you say it's the study of, so do I have to study it?
No, what I mean is the suffix ology to me means the study of. So when you say when you put that on episteme, right, it's the study of episteme.
Well, right. Again, I think
that's all I'm saying.
See, some of this is like obvious. I mean, I understand that there's a difference between the object of the analysis and the method that we're going to use, and there's the study of and then the thing studied. I'm suggesting that when you're even doing that, when you're doing that, do you see how that's already an ontological problem?
Yes, I certainly do.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, you keep waking me up to the fact that, because I said we do it all with our intellect, and you made me realize, no, it's my whole body that's doing philosophy.
Yes.
But I can't express all of that in words. You know what I mean? You can't. I can't give you experience in words. I just can give you philosophy. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, well, I thought it was interesting that you were given logic because. So, what room does the logician's epistemology have for emotion? Is it just a valence? I mean, it's a numerical valence. You know, I felt anger to the to a 0.73.
Well, yeah, I think the only way a logician could handle emotion logically would be that's exactly what I do. Is in a sense a valence. But that's why we have aesthetics. The focus of aesthetics is emotion.
I mean, I feel like this is sort of what's being done, right? This is like the 3-card Monty that's being suggested. Like if I say I feel, you're going to go, oh, but how do you know that you feel? And I'm going to go, look, I feel, and you're going to go, yeah, but how do you know that you feel? And then you're going to say, well, what kind of knowledge do you have about your feelings? And the whole world of feeling is going to get reduced to something like the knowledge we have of our feelings.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that, though.
Okay, so which comes first, feelings or knowledge?
Feeling.
Okay, so how could epistemology come before ontology?
Because I'm talking about explaining, not, in a sense, how the order in which it emerged.
Okay, but even explaining it.
Well,
I'm even the study of. Why wouldn't you have to? I think you'd have to. The formal study would still have to come before it.
No, you're right. And actually, the way I do it is the way I handle ontology is through aesthetics, and the way I handle knowledge is through logics, what I call the branches of philosophy. And I teach, and even in my text I'm writing, the aesthetics gets delivered first. Because it in a sense explains why you have any experience at all, right? And what it basically gives you the being of yourself, not the knowing. I need a drink of water. I'm so dry.
Right. Well, maybe I'll just stop right there. I think we tried to hammer out some of the things. Well, what else? Do you want to say anything else? I mean, I think this is like, again, it's very similar to the index icon haggle. I wonder how many people. And I guess it's interesting. So, we're in agreement that the index is prior to icon, or I think they may be simultaneous, but we could give some precedence to index.
In emergence of sentient beings, I think certainly indexicality is prior. But I want to say that that the bottom level is not indexicality and iconicity; it's contiguity and isomorphism. Those are the physical structures.
Right.
To me, that's when we talked about how last time how. There's some kind of form out there. You don't want to say it's bodies. We don't want to say bodies or things. But to me, it's continuity and isomorphism, whatever that means. And that's as far as I can understand it. You know?
I mean, it's not to deny the almost, I mean, maybe this is so pedantic, it sounds like we're splitting hairs. I mean, I'm not denying that epistemology comes right on the tails, But I would not only say that ontology as a field of study is much broader, it's huge.
Oh, yes. No, you're right.
And again, epistemology is a little subset of that. But even there, I would say both evolutionarily, people do not understand that epistemology is an ontological problem and issue, and people don't seem to understand the degree to which just logically you have to make an ontological commitment in order to begin any epistemology. Now you could say, how do you know that? And then we're back to I guess a feeling has to be known.
Yeah. But the thing is, I don't think you even have to bother with somebody saying, how do you know that? Because if you don't assume, because we're talking again about what Percy said, you have to assume that there's something out there to be explained, or there's nothing to do. You might as well just shut up.
Right. Well, right? Again, if you say that there's something out there to be explained, though, I mean, again, for Percy, it doesn't necessarily mean something separate from you. It means there's a process of semiosis. And so again, exactly. he's getting to the firstness of something, pure possibility. See, again, he doesn't make any commitment that would be of the epistemological order. I mean, he's sort of, I mean, his epistemology is almost like, see, some of that gets really difficult. I mean, I guess you could say some epistemologies are what they begin with their ontology. I mean, that's sort of...
Yeah. I mean, it's yeah, but I agree with you. Ontology is much more general even than epistemology, because only certain aspects of ontology, only sentient beings are bothered with epistemology, right? But there's lots of ontology, or onticity as I prefer, that is not bothered with epistemology.
Well, I mean, again, so, there, like in that expression, again, that expression makes perfectly good sense to me, and I think we all use those expressions. But there, I mean, for us to even talk about other organisms having epistemologies, well, they're not studying. See, that's what's interesting. See, we're back to this. When the professor says to the student, they have an epistemology in their closet, they haven't really realized it. Well, how could they have? Or do they? I mean, are they properly having an epistemology if it's in the closet, or do they have to study their own processes of knowing? And then you say, well, can you really do that without having consciousness? Isn't that part of self-consciousness?
I was thinking about the tick again, and I was thinking, because I know Peirce at least says that we make inferences from what we sense, from our sense quantum, or whatever you want to call it, and I can't agree with that. And I'm thinking the tick. Well, now, what happens is butyric acid becomes present, and it has a detector for butyric acid, and so that trigger fires. Does the tick say, wow, does that mean there's butyric acid out there? Or just, for the tick, butyric acid is out there when that trigger fires? Right. Or, I mean, there's no difference between those two in a sense, right? It's not like the tick is inferring something from the firing of what's going on in its head. It's just going to react to that.
Right. I mean, in some way, there's a concatenation of interrelated events that happen, and the discrete lines of boundaries are sort of. It's not that there aren't things there relating, but there's no necessary alignment between the categories we use to linguistically align them and the objects that are there. That any objects can be labeled at multiple levels and in multiple ways. Not to deny the objects, but you're never sure of, are you hitting them at the joints or not? Quotes.
Exactly. Carping nature at the joint, right? I mean, what's nature's joints like anyway?
Right. Again, not that there aren't. Obviously, once we get to it gets funny. See, the example that I was given before was of art. If you ask the question, and this is how I was trying to raise how epistemology is an ontological issue and an ontological problem. And then you need to logically understand that before you can begin any study of epistemology. If you're going to begin the study of epistemology without seeing how epistemology has occurred as an ontological issue, I think people are going to get deeply confused. And I tried to give the memory example. Here's the art example. If you say to people, does nature have art? Does nature do art? Does it exhibit art? People will often say, nope. They'll go, people can see art in nature, or people create art, but nature doesn't have any art. And what they do right there in that simple statement is they make it seem as if humans are other than natural, and nature somehow doesn't include the human. And And in that same move, we underestimate how humans are that part of nature that arts.
Yeah, really.
Right? See, and so when you start to look at how ontology has to be the ground for an informed epistemology, I think otherwise you get into all these kinds of confusions where you end up going, look, there is no art in nature. And it's like, well, what the hell are humans? And this is the same problem that occurs with how does thought occur? I mean, is thought somehow natural? I mean, does agency occur in nature? See, this all began with the question of how can agency be natural? To which I want to go, we're that part of nature which has agency. I'm not saying we made up our agency. I didn't make up I've been sentenced to it.
Really.